Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, and I'm back in Duncton. I'm back with John Mays. Hello, John.
Hello, Richard. Morning to you.
Morning to you. This is the second in our series of videos about Duncton and its history. Duncton, for those who may not have seen the first video, is a village at the foot of the South Downs in West Sussex, just below Duncton Hill.
Duncton Hill, yes, that's right.
In between Petworth and Chichester, I guess.
Yes.
And we are standing, as we did in the previous video, in a graveyard. We're back at St Mary's, aren't we?
That's right, St Mary's. Their earlier name was in the Church of Our Lady.
So, and today that's what we're going to explore, because the actual church, St Mary's, is no longer here. It's missing because it basically fell to bits and was demolished.
That's right, yes. So it was in 1876.
And you have a nice newer church, or a Victorian church, up the road, which we'll look at another time, because it's got a connection to this. Not only is it to do with the bell, but we'll get to that in a minute. So this church, what I wanted to find out about, John, is why the church is here. What would bring people to Duncton? We know that the area of the South Downs and around here in the Weald in the Neolithic times was home to the early farmers. We know, and there's evidence, isn't there, of that near Duncton?
Yes, I think that's right. I think that's the key to it all. It was the beginning of a movement which saw the farmer settlers, where they started to settle down and take agriculture really quite seriously.
Yes.
So Duncton and his followers arrived here.
And Duncton is a Saxon, am I right?
Duncton is a Saxon, we are told from the record, yes. He arrived here and saw a collection of things that might well attract you to drop anchor, so to speak.
Yes.
First being is that there is a spring valley just over there.
Yes, so
providing
you've got
water.
Yes, because you've got the South Downs, which is a huge pile of chalk.
That's right. So we're looking at the escarpment side of the South Downs.
The water comes through the chalk, hits the clay, and then emerges.
It emerges, and that's typical of ever so many villages along the northern side of this escarpment.
Yes,
and Duncton is just one of those.
That's
so
right.
You can see the water.
Yes, so that's a good reason to come.
They knew enough about agriculture to recognise good soil when they saw it.
Yes.
So that was that. There was also the lie of the land was such that it was favourable to build houses and make a settlement.
And I imagine that because we're talking about the Saxon period, and prior to that you would have had Romans, you would have had the Neolithics and the Iron Age people. Lines of communication had already, footpaths.
Absolutely, yes. Communication was the other important thing which you'd look for in a settlement. Someone had already cleared the way a bit. It's almost like a crossroads with a substantial footpath running east-west and north-south.
Right, so that it made sense to your Saxon Duncton to go, here's a great place, and not only that, there's nobody else here already.
Yes.
And we know that by 1086 in the Domesday Book, before the Normans came and then they did their great Domesday Book, the record, we know there was a church on the site built of stone, rough stone.
Well, that's right, that's what we're told. It was built, well, we're not told that became evident when the excavation was made. Built of rough stone, plaster surfaces, a wood tiled roof, a wooden bell tower, a very small one, a cote, perhaps that's a better way of putting it, and a simple porch on the west end rather, of the church itself.
So this is the old sign that does look a bit sad now, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It's suffered from the weather, hasn't it? But, in order to follow through with their worship, the nearest church was at Petworth.
Yes.
And it's said that Duncton, built this church here in order to save the people of Duncton the long and muddy walk up to Petworth. Because there was no other church. Yes.
Because it's like 3 miles away?
3 miles away.
Yes.
For some reason, this was gifted to Lewes Priory as a church.
Yes.
And that meant that the Lewes Priory took over all of the aspects of running the church, including providing the monks to run the services.
So at least one monk, one priest from there, or several, would have lived in the vicinity.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Because it's actually quite a long way from here to Lewes.
Well, it must be, what is it, 20 miles? Something like that. I mean, it's quite so they would...
But there's no record that I know of about that, but yes.
Yes, it's clearly marked out, isn't it? I guess where the excavation was.
That's right, yes.
So it was, 46 foot long?
They say 46 foot long and nearly 20 feet wide.
Right, so quite a small, dinky little place.
It is. It's described as being small but adequate for the number of people.
Yes.
200 to 250 inhabitants on the West Bank, so
right.
Not very many people.
No, but lovely to have their own place.
Oh, yes.
So, up until the dissolution of the monasteries, then, it was looked after by the Lewes Priory.
Yes. Well, then it reverts back to Petworth's parish.
Yes, because it's sort of cut off, isn't it,
that's
from
right.
Lewes?
Yes. And it becomes a chapel of ease for Petworth.
Right. And you know that because you've got a whole list of the rectors,
that's right. At that time, there's a whole list of the vicars who take us through to a long way, up to the 1800s and so on.
Right.
But before that, something else had happened.
Yes.
Which was the fact that Duncton had become a parish in its own right by deed of Parliament in 1692.
There are two names that really associated that are important.
Well, of course, there are a lot of important people of the district.
Yes.
But two, I think, that stand out. And one is Socket, Thomas Socket, who was a very prominent person of the whole of the parish, including Petworth as well. He did a number of things, not least of which being a leading light in the Petworth Emigration Society. That was when times were very hard in and around the whole of the area, way beyond this village, more into the whole of the county.
Yes.
The rising prices and poverty, Napoleonic wars and so on. And organised this scheme which found a new life for very many people, particularly country people, out into Canada.
He's not buried here though, is he?
He's not buried here.
But there is somebody who is.
Very much. Yes. Probably the most important people for this village is James Dean.
And we're not talking about the film star?
No, we aren't, no. Mind you, he was of that status in his time, I should think.
Right.
Who played cricket for both his county, Sussex, and England.
So he was buried here?
He was buried here.
And then was moved?
The tombstone is moved to next door and is there to this day.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
There's lots of interesting tombstones. Shall we have a little gander at some of them?
Yes.
So here's a. I mean, this is a typical one, isn't it?
Yes, very much so, yes.
And they date from
1750 to 1850, covers the whole range of stones.
This one's 1828.
1828.
Beautifully
yes.
preserved.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
The name Helia, well, that's a very popular Sussex name, probably very often called Helia. Certainly was a Duncton name. Osborne, ditto on the other one over there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And behind us, a similar tombstone where we've seen the name Hollis. That was quite a well-known and important family name in this and adjoining villages too.
So John, our cricketer James Dean buried here in the sort of mid-Victorian period.
That's right, something like that, yes.
And soon after that the church must have become in a state or something, because you've got a new church that was built fairly soon.
That's right. So you can only presume that sometime after James Dean's death, 1861, that this church would fall into such a state of disrepair that its cost of maintenance was becoming far too high.
Yes.
At least that's one reason.
Yes.
And a decision was taken from that point to build the new church called Holy Trinity, which was built in 1866/7. At the other end of the village. We've talked about the village being in two parts.
That's right.
So this sort of spiritual centre, you might say, moved from here to the northern half of the village.
One good thing came out of it. The bell that was here was transported and now resides in the new church.
Absolutely right, yes. I mean, I think it's significant that the anguish of the settlers here, the villagers here, was recognised, because there was a 10-year gap between this church being demolished and the church in Duncton being brought into use.
Yeah. Well, John, it is overgrown now.
Yes.
It would have looked very smart, probably.
I think so.
Especially in the Victorian period, they looked after stuff, didn't they?
And in a lovely setting.
And a beautiful setting with the Duncton hangar there and all of that.
Yeah, yeah.
We haven't mentioned, of course, that adjacent to the church in the Victorian period is the early school, and we're going to talk about that in another video on another occasion.
Yeah.
What I think is fantastic about this is you still have the graveyard here, the churchyard.
Yes, yes.
It's still accessible. People can come, they can have a look round, and they can see for themselves.
Yes, yes.
And you know, if you're in the area or you live locally or you're stopping and you're walking by, do come down and have a look. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely brilliant. So don't forget to look out for the next videos in the Duncton series. But in the meantime, do like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment, tell us what you think about these videos, and we'll see you on the next one. Brilliant, John. Down the pub, is it, for a swift half?
I think we're appropriate.
Yes.